When Tane was creating all the birds of the forest, Kuaka was one of his favourite. And Kuaka strayed more towards his brother's side of his uncle of Tangaroa. And Kuaka was the bird that liked to talk the most and chitter-chatter and loved telling stories and loved new information. And he would flitter off and find these little stories, and he'd come back, and he was like the storyteller of all the birds. And then one day Kuaka got really pouty. He was starting to get quite pouty, and Tane asked him, what's wrong, Kuaka? Kia ha tō raru? And Kuaka had said, I'd run out of stories to tell. I've no longer got any more kōrero. Everybody's heard my kōrero, and I want to see these new things. And so Tane looked upon him and saw his child and said, oh well, this is what I will do for you. And he asked him to close his eyes. So when he closed his eyes, he slipped into him a stone that sits in his throat. And when he woke, Kuaka placed half of his heart in the kokota sands of the Pārengarenga Harbour, because that's where kokota lives. It's one of Kuaka's homes, is our kokota. And I suppose he had said to Kuaka that he could go and travel, and he was to travel past Hawaii Nui and Hawaii Roa and into the distance of Hawaii Pāmau. But when he was to get tired, he was to call upon his brother, his uncle, who would rise up and support him. He was also told not to eat anything or take anything from anybody he didn't know. So off Kuaka went with half a heart and a stone in his throat, and with his, with Tane saying, return to me. You'll know when to return to me, but return to me in the season when the summer comes, when the sun comes back. So off he went, and he saw and these are stories that my nanny used to tell us on the middle of the hill out in Kiakaha Hill, as we could overlook the Kuaka, and they're little children's stories, and so Kuaka went past Hawaii Nui, and he saw the crocodiles and the snakes, and there were whānau there that kōrero only Māori, and that's why we have relationships over there, because there were still tribes that were there on the journey. And so he picked up a few stories there, and then he went to Hawaii Pāmau, and he started to get really tired journeying towards, the Hawaiis of Hawaii. And so he called out to his uncle, and his uncle of Tangaroa rose up a sand spit, and that sand spit is now known as Osaka, which is in Japan, and it's a place where Kuaka lands, like the kokota, like Osaka. Yeah. And she talked of how he ate there, because Kuaka only eats out of the sea. He's pure. And so he travelled into the far distance where he came to these wetlands, and he saw these birds that looked quite similar to him. And he landed, and he fell in love. And when he fell in love, he married into this whole new whānau of birds that just looked just like him. And he had children, and he had mokopuna coming, and he had fathers-in-law, he had all this whānau, and the stone started to pull in his throat, and the season started to change, and he knew he had to go home. And his wife wouldn't come with him, because she said that who would stay and look after the old people, and that he needed to journey back himself. So he rallied up all his children and his mokopuna, and he took flight. So when Kuaka takes flight, he flies up once, and he circles, and then the other two come in, and they circle, and on the next wave, they all leave. But this time, before he left there, he put the other part of his heart in the sand. So he has no heart, because it belongs in two different lands, one on this side of the world and on the other side of the world. He comes home to us. So when he came home, it was in Raumati, in the peak of the summer, or not summer, it's Kuaka signifies to us a season and it's a different type of season. So this season brings the sun. It also brings happiness, it brings whānau time, it brings celebrations. Like Kuaka signifies that to us as Ngāti Kuri when we know he comes home and he lands. But yeah, so basically Kuaka who has no heart, but Kuaka who can travel the world and has all this knowledge, and he brings it here and he takes it over there and he traverses the whole of the world and he shares his knowledge.